tuned to listener-sponsored non-commercial WBAI in New York, 99.5 FM.
Shelton Walden here on Walden's Pond. Well, Australian doctors recommended male circumcision Friday, according to Reuters, from June 8th, as a means to prevent the spread of the HIV virus that causes AIDS. Their review of previous studies of circumcision and HIV showed that the virus is usually passed through the penis, and that men who have been circumcised are 2 to 8 times less likely to become infected with HIV. Quote, male circumcision should be seriously considered as an additional means of preventing HIV in all countries with a high prevalence of infection, Professor Roger Short of the University of Melbourne wrote in a report in the British Medical Journal. Short and his colleagues acknowledged that cultural and religious attitudes play a major role in circumcision in many countries, but said mounting evidence has proven the benefits. Although circumcising babies is the least complicated procedure, it would not have an impact on HIV transmission rates for 15 to 20 years. The researchers suggested circumcising teenage boys would be much more effective. Short said circumcision at puberty, as practiced by many Muslim communities, would be the most immediately effective intervention for reducing HIV transmission, since it would be done before young men are likely to become sexually active. How circumcision prevents HIV infection is still a mystery, but Short and his colleagues believe the inner surface of the foreskin could be the route. The foreskin removed during circumcision contains cells that have HIV receptors, which the researchers suspect are the primary entry point for the virus into the penis. Half of the estimated 50 million people worldwide infected with the HIV virus are men, and most have been infected through their penis. The inner surface of the foreskin, which is rich in HIV receptors, and the frenulum, a thin band connecting the inner foreskin, must be regarded as the most probable sites for viral entry in primary HIV infection in men, Short said. Although they were confident circumcision would help, the researchers said other methods were also needed. The development of topically active agents that can block HIV binding sites such as CCR5, and which could be applied to the penis or vagina to create a chemical condom, might be more effective and acceptable than any mechanical or surgical intervention, Short said. That's from the Reuters report from last Friday. And, well, we have covered this issue many times here on Walden's Pond, and we're just getting an update today. We'll be talking with Mr. Greg Boyle. He's a professor of psychology at Bond University in Queensland, Australia. Greg, are you there?
Yes, I am.
First of all, good morning to you. How are you?
Hey. Very good, thank you. How are you?
Not bad, not bad. Thank you for joining us, I know, at a very unreasonable hour of the morning for you. You, of course, have been active on this issue. We talked last year about this. You've been active on this issue for some time, the issue of infant male circumcision and trying to involved in the movement to end it. This report comes from your country. I was wondering, what do you make of this latest developments?
What I make of it is that the first point that you raised, that Australian doctors have made these claims regarding AIDS and circumcision. Well, the fact of the matter is that the Australian Medical Association does not recommend routine neonatal circumcision by any means. And in fact, I don't think any medical association anywhere in the world recommends circumcision of infants on a routine basis. So I don't know of any medical society that recommends circumcision as a protection against AIDS. Secondly, the claims that they make are quite ridiculous. I mean, they're based on African studies, which clearly do not apply to the to the Western world, to the United States, Australia, Canada, etc. It doesn't apply to the industrialized world where you've got different standards, better standards of hygiene and education. And first of all, they're very, very selective about the studies that they choose to pick from Africa. They've spoken about one particular country, Uganda. Why don't they talk about Ethiopia, where the rate of circumcision is extremely high and the rate of AIDS and HIV infection is also extremely high, which proves quite clearly that circumcision does not prevent transmission of HIV. I mean, we only have to look at the epidemiological evidence, compare the United States with Europe. In Europe, most of the men are intact. They're not circumcised by and large. And the incidence of HIV/AIDS is considerably lower, much lower, many times lower than, for example, in the United States, where, you've got upwards of 100 million circumcised men. And the fact of the matter is that the United States has perhaps the leading rate of HIV and AIDS infection in the industrialized world. And yet they've got the highest proportion of circumcised men. So if circumcision actually prevented the transmission of AIDS or reduced it, you would have one of the lowest rates of HIV and AIDS in the United States. In fact, you have one of the highest rates, which quite clearly shows that circumcision does not prevent or even, in fact, reduce the transmission of HIV/AIDS.
Yeah. Yes. It's rather striking that Africa is somewhat the laboratory for a lot of these studies regarding HIV and circumcision. There was reports that appeared in the Scientific American some time ago around this, that they were recommending circumcision in Africa in order to prevent AIDS. Now, this report, of course, came from the British Medical Journal, which is well respected around the world for its probity about a lot of medical issues. And some of the points that the report makes was that the majority of men who are HIV positive have been infected through the penis, that there is conclusive epidemiological evidence to suggest that uncircumcised men are a much greater risk of becoming infected with HIV than circumcised men, that the inner surface of the foreskin contains Langerhans cells with HIV receptors. These cells are likely to be the primary points of viral interest into the penis of an uncircumcised man. Male circumcision should be seriously considered as an additional means of preventing HIV in all countries with a high prevalence of infection, and the development of HIV receptor blockers, which could be applied to the penis or vagina before intercourse, might provide a new form of HIV prevention. It just seems that for thousands of years, people have been having sex and intercourse, and now this is really taking. It's becoming. It seems like man or uncircumcised men are the receptors or the harbingers of all sorts of disease and just a hornet's nest of infection. Hello?
Yes.
What do you make of this? It seems like it's positing uncircumcised men as being the sort of the carrier of all these different diseases of HIV. And
yeah, I think historically, if we look at the historical record, what we see is that those people who have been advocating circumcision of males have used whatever the particular disease which is prevalent at that particular point in history as their rationale for justifying the mutilation of the genitals of males.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, we only have to go back a little bit to see, a few years ago they were talking about, initially, of course, circumcision was proposed as an anti-masturbation remedy.
Yes.
And, of course, that didn't work. Then they said, well, it must be, it'll prevent cancer of the penis. And then they discovered, well, only 1 in 200,000 men in old age get cancer of the penis, so circumcising 200,000 boys to protect one man in old age from possibly getting cancer of the penis is ridiculous.
Yes.
And then they said, well, if that doesn't work, then the latest thing is urinary tract infections. Circumcision will prevent urinary tract infections. That's just an absurd statement. The fact of the matter is only 1 to 2% of uncircumcised males, that is intact males, ever get urinary tract infections, and a $20 antibiotic is the remedy, not radical amputation.
Yes.
And, I mean, the current state of medical practice is to use conservative methods of treatment in the first instance rather than go to most dramatic, radical amputation, which is completely unreasonable.
Yeah.
And now we've got the latest thing, of course, and now it's the HIV scare.
Yes.
So whatever the current disease is, that is the particular disease that is used as a justification by those people who are hell-bent, who have absolute hysteria against any kind of sexuality, and wish to suppress the sexuality of males.
Yes. What's particularly, and of course this is very important. We're talking about this because this is in the U.S. right now, unofficially known as Men's Health Week, and of course with the HIV/AIDS conference set to take place in South Africa very shortly, and of course with the news coming out of Africa that HIV and AIDS is devastating the continent, and in poor communities, in communities of color here, there is the death rate of AIDS is particularly high, quote unquote HIV/AIDS. This report has been prominent throughout the media, is particularly alarming, and could serve as a basis for future mass circumcisions of people to prevent AIDS.
Well, I think it would be an absolute tragedy because, number one, it's not going to work. I mean, it's quite clear from the epidemiological evidence, if we take the United States versus Europe alone, that there is a vast that circumcision does not prevent transmission of AIDS. I mean, there are thousands upon thousands of circumcised men with AIDS at the present time, even in the United States alone. And it's totally irresponsible for people to be going around saying that circumcision is going to reduce the incidence of HIV and AIDS infection. And I would just like to bring up one point, and that is you raised the point before about the British Medical Journal being a respectable journal.
Yes.
I thought it was too until this article was published. I mean, the fact of the matter, this article was a completely biased review of the literature. They failed to mention that there have been, in fact, some 35 studies published in this area, and only very recently, in the International Journal of STDs and AIDS, 1999, Volume 10, there was a paper by R.S. Van Houw. This was a meta-analysis study of over 29 of these studies, not just one single study, as Szabo and Short have reported, but 29 studies all grouped together. And the overall meta-analytic results, which is a very advanced statistical procedure, shows that when the raw data are combined, a man with a circumcised penis, and I'm reading from the paper here, is at a greater risk of acquiring and transmitting HIV than a man with a non-circumcised penis. The odds ratio is 1.06 and at 95% confidence interval. So, based on these studies, there's over 29 studies recommending routine circumcision as a prophylactic measure to prevent HIV infection in Africa or elsewhere is scientifically unfounded. And I think it's absolute tragedy that the British Medical Journal would publish such a trash article that is completely one-sided and biased. And they've left out and completely failed to admit the fact that a meta-analysis study has been conducted on over 29 studies, and they have not reported these results.
We're on WBAI 99.5 FM. We're talking with Greg Boyle, who is a professor of psychology at Bond University in Queensland, Australia, and a longtime researcher and activist on the issue of circumcision around the world. And we're going to take a brief break. We're going to come back, and we'll be taking your phone calls at 212-209-2900 on this most controversial issue, looking at HIV and circumcision. Please stay with us. We'll be right back here on this edition of Walden's Pond.
Sponsored non-commercial WBAI in New York, 99.5 FM.
We're back here on Walden's Pond here in New York City. We're talking with Greg Boyle from Australia, from Queensland, Australia. We're professor of psychology at Queensland, Australia, expert on men's health issues, and we're talking about the latest report published by the British Medical Journal, and also reported throughout the world in the press, linking HIV and saying that male circumcision may prevent HIV infection. And of course, we've been discussing this issue, looking at these issues for some time, and the ongoing controversy and battle over this issue. It's a public health issue, and clearly it affects millions of people. And of course, it's a very fundamental issue of male health, male sexuality, and sexuality for human beings in general. It affects both men, women, and everybody who's interested in keeping each other healthy physically as well as psychologically. And again, my guest is Greg Boyle this afternoon. Before we go to the phone calls here at 212-209-2900 here, I want to let also the audience know that they can get more information about this on the web at www.nocirc.org, nocirc.org, or noharm.org. That's nocirc, NOCIRC, or noharm, NOHARMM.org. And lots of information is out there if you wish to educate yourself about this. Just on a counter note, Dr. Thomas Wiswell, who is a professor of pediatrics at Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia, he's a proponent of infant circumcision, and he was quoted in an article which appeared 2 days ago in USA Today regarding this very issue about the British Medical Journal and their article regarding male circumcision and HIV. He says that a higher incidence of infant urinary tract infections and penile cancer and life are clearly present in the uncircumcised population. A host of studies also indicate that circumcised men appear to be more resistant to HIV. And I find it interesting he would say that because, like you mentioned, the U.S. has one of the highest circumcision rates in all the world, and we also have one of the highest AIDS rates in all the world. So how it seems like his comments don't really add up. Greg, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
In fact, I have the figures in front of me. I'm just looking at the statistics in front of me, and the USA specifically, the AIDS prevalence per 100,000, the figures I have are 16 per 100,000. And if we compare this, say, with Scandinavian countries, which have virtually a zero rate of circumcision among the population, what we find is Finland, the incidence of AIDS prevalence per 100,000 is only 0.9, and Norway 1.5. And you compare these figures with 16 in the United States, which has 100 million circumcised men. Who are these people kidding?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the tragedy here is that it's drawing people away. It's giving people the false illusion that if they don't practice safe sex, all they need to do is get circumcised.
Yeah.
And I mean, God help them,
Right.
That's all I can say, because we're going to have a massive worldwide tragedy as a result of this if people actually listen to this article that's recently been published.
Yeah. One thing that struck me about the article as well was that Denmark, a country of overwhelmingly uncircumcised men, has the lowest penile cancer rate in the world. India, on the other hand, with a similarly large uncircumcised population, has one of the world's highest penile cancer rates. Some say that hygiene may make the difference in a lot of this.
Yes, well, this is one of the factors, of course, that hygiene is always very important, and of course, in modern industrialized societies such as the United States and Australia, we have a modern invention called the shower.
Right.
And most of us, at least here in Australia, like to have a daily shower at least. So I think it's basically like brushing your teeth and cleaning behind your ears, and if you can't be relied upon to do that, then should we pull out all our teeth and have our ears cut off as well?
Absolutely.
I mean, where does this argument finish?
It also seems to connect with the fact of access to fresh water and access to lots of things that we take for granted here, and may account for a lot of disease rates being high or low.
Yes, well, certainly, I think that the hygiene issue is a very relevant one, but at the same time, I don't think that circumcising all the people in Africa in Africa is going to slow down the HIV infection rate one iota. In fact, it may well increase it because, as we've said already, the incidence of HIV in the United States, for example, is extremely high, where most of the men are circumcised. So I would suggest that circumcision, if anything, is likely to increase the risk of HIV infection.
Yes. Let's find out what our listeners think here. We're talking with Greg Boyle, longtime activist and researcher on the issue of male health and male sexuality, and he's a professor of psychology at Bond University in Queensland, Australia. We're talking to him live on the phone here in New York. Shelton Walden here in Walden's Pond. If you wish to talk with him about this latest report regarding HIV and circumcision and male health in general, 212-209-2900, 212-209-2900 here on WBAI 99.5 FM in New York City. Shelton Walden here on Walden's Pond. And we're going to go to our first phone call here for our guest. WBAI, you're on the air. Hello?
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, I'm calling from my car, so I hope the reception is good.
Fine. Who's this?
My name is Paul. I'm calling from New Jersey.
Okay, go ahead, please.
I just read an article on the web. This guy, Showen, I think his name is.
Who?
Dr. Showen. I don't know what...
Oh, Edgar Showen.
Oh, thank you. He was saying that I don't know if this is true. In uncircumcised males, the transmission of female to male AIDS is a lot more common than in circumcised males. Do you have any comments on that?
Okay, Greg Boyle?
Yeah, look, I think the comments by Edgar Schoen are spurious, and they're not based on any actual scientific evidence. I mean, I think the fact of the matter is that what we need to promote here is education about safe-sex practices, the use of condoms and so forth, not only for the prevention of the transmission of HIV/AIDS, but also other sexually transmitted diseases. It's interesting to note, for example, that among circumcised men, the prevalence of chlamydia infection is considerably higher than amongst intact men. So, I think we need to be very careful about just a simplistic solution that circumcision is going to prevent transmission of STDs such
well,
as
he was
HIV
saying
and
that
AIDS.
because you're more likely to have a tear or a lesion on the foreskin that the AIDS could enter. Do you have any comments on that? Is that, I mean, being circumcised, I don't know if that's true, but I'm just wondering if that is a common problem on attacked men, that the foreskin could rip or what have you, or is it more sensitive?
This is a theoretical proposition that most circumcised men can only theorize about, so, I don't have any comment on that particularly, but I would say that the emphasis, once again, should be on the promotion of safe sex, use of condoms, etc., rather than on this so-called argument, which is more or less a theoretical argument for most circumcised men.
Yeah, I guess you're right, because, safe sex is important for either circumcised or intact men, of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Listen, I thank you.
I'd hate to be giving all of these men the false promise that just by being circumcised they're not going to get AIDS or HIV. I mean, just ask the thousands upon thousands of American men, for God's sake, who have been circumcised,
Yeah, I know.
and
I
yet
know a
have
few
got
of them.
HIV and AIDS now.
Right, I'm a gay man, and I know a few of them, believe me.
Yeah. I mean, if circumcision prevented the transmission of AIDS, we wouldn't have all these thousands of men with AIDS at the present time.
Yeah, I guess that's true, but I'm just wondering the female-to-male thing. I wonder if you have any scientific research on that besides what this doctor is saying.
Well, look, personally, I'm not aware of any research in this area, and I think Edgar Schoen is a totally scientifically disrespected kind of individual. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, nothing of what he says is scientifically founded.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for calling.
Bye now.
Bye-bye. 212-209-2900 for our guest, Greg Boyle. WBAI, you're on the air. Hello?
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Hussein. I'm calling from upstate New York.
Yes, go ahead, please.
I have a slight problem that HIV and circumcision have something to do with HIV. I don't think so. If you go to Islamic literature, the Holy Quran, God says people have disease in their heart, and He will increase their disease until they change their condition. So He says, you see, if you go according to Islamic law, it's against God's will. It's against God's will. You see, so I don't know. He say even you
Wait,
can
excuse-
research. He say you can research any way you can. He will still increase your disease. So if you're doing something wrong, which is against God's will, it's still gonna happen.
What's against God's will?
Like a homosexuality,
Oh, okay.
okay, having a
But
married man commit adultery.
But all right. But aside from that,
Right.
we're not talking about the morality or immorality of people's bedroom or sexual habits.
Right.
We're talking about whether or not circumcision will prevent HIV, quote unquote HIV/AIDS. And that's the report that we're talking about this afternoon, which was published in the British Medical Journal and also published in many newspaper articles around the world for the last week or so.
Right.
The morality of an individual really has nothing to do with this. Okay? Because everyone gets sick, and everyone, unfortunately, we come down with different diseases, regardless of the morality or immorality of someone's behavior.
Right.
So, could you do you have any comment about that, rather than?
But I think circumcision is something that God has permitted for every human being, every male in this universe has to circumcise.
Okay, but
It is from the beginning.
That's your belief.
It's the belief. You say it's the belief of the whole universe. But people change the law. People change the rules and everything.
With all due respect, it's a belief of your universe. I mean, or your belief system. But there are many people out here who don't believe that, and there are also many people who have those belief systems who are reevaluating whether or not some of those tenets are correct. Okay?
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I appreciate your call.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Okay. Greg, we're going to move on to another call here, okay?
Sure.
Okay. WBAI, you're on the air. Hello?
Good show. Good show. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, expert.
Hello?
Good show. Good show. And thank you very much, expert, for being on the air with us.
Thank you. Who's calling, please?
I'm Bob Tinnitus, Staten Island.
Oh, how are you?
Super.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Matter of fact, I was just reading a piece of mail you sent to me last year, the other day.
Really?
Yes.
Maybe that's the reason I'm calling you today. How much I'm learning about human nature with the circumcision questions you've brought up. Mr. Walden, I ask a lot of people about being conditioned. I said, what percentage of the men of the world who are not, according to religious custom, are circumcised? What percentage? Most people say 85, 90%, because they don't know that most men in the world, except for religious reasons, are not circumcised. It's the other way around. 85, 90% are not circumcised. So thank you for that. Now, as far as AIDS transmission and all the rest of it, I want to, what is motivating this kind of quote-unquote statements? From what I've seen, there's usually a commercial involvement. There's usually a financial kickback somewhere along the line. And forgive me for being crass, but would you expand on that a tiny bit, please?
Oh, sure.
Okay, I'm going to hang up.
Okay.
Thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you for being there. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Greg, what about the financial rewards, or if there are any, regarding this issue? I mean, we've touched upon this periodically from time to time. There's an enormous industry. The circumcision industry is a big business.
Yes, certainly. And, I think we're talking a $1 billion industry in the United States alone. I mean, if each doctor, each obstetrician, for example, who circumcises a newborn male, I mean, I'm not sure of the exact fee at the present time, but say it's $150 or $200 or whatever. I mean, you only have to do a few of those. By the end of the year, you've got enough money to put a down deposit on a new Mercedes-Benz, haven't you?
Yes.
So there is obviously a financial incentive here for doctors to go and mutilate children.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, but there are actual companies in the United States that pay hospitals and so forth for these foreskins to use them in their research because, because of the animal rights protests of activists in this area, of course the companies are too scared now to do research on animals and animal tissues very often, so what they do is they lop off the foreskins of humans because humans are fair game, particularly males. That's quite okay. You can get away with mutilating human males. So there is that financial kickback there. There's no question about that. There is an industry out there, that's for sure.
Yes, there is, and it's many companies, some on the stock exchange, which are making a lot of money off of foreskins, ostensibly to help human beings with burns and other tissue culture research. That's at least that's the literature, and that's the goal of some of these companies. That's what they claim. But there's, of course, there's ethical and if you will, moral component here, that removing tissue involuntarily from someone in order to fulfill another requirement, and also gaining remuneration from that without compensating the person who you took it from, there's a lot of problems with all of that. But the first and foremost is removing tissue from a person without their consent, which is a serious problem. Let's go on to another call here. WBAI, you're on the air here on Walden's Pond with Greg Boyle.
Hello, Sheldon. This is Sharon. I'm calling because I wanted to mention the website for people who are still collecting information about AIDS and the validity of AIDS and the connection with HIV, if there is one, and so on.
Okay.
And it's virusmyth.com. And it will help people think things out for themselves, which I think is important. And if we stay close to common sense and use that as the guiding light, people will get to, I think, where they need to in order to feel comfortable being alive at this time. I know there's a great concern about that. I wanted to mention something also about circumcision. I think what's not emphasized enough is that this is an unnecessary surgery performed on a newborn who has just come through an extraordinary experience of birth. And the medical surgery, which we all know surgeries are stressful. They shock the system. They actually do threaten life because, as we've seen, there can be grave mistakes made during circumcision. This is not compassionate. Regardless of what a parent thinks about believing the doctor, I think it's important to be more in touch with what violates the human organism. I know you've talked about this. Do you have any comments?
I agree. I totally agree with you. This is this is something that's has become part of our culture here, and it's deeply ingrained, and it's rooted in religion, and rooted in culture, and rooted in a lot of pressures, family and societal pressures to do so, and it's very difficult to root out.
The covenant, they say, that is between the God and the human being. God doesn't expect us to scarify ourselves and remove healthy parts of ourselves. I think, personally, this is a misinterpretation of God's word.
Yeah. Well,
and I know that everybody is an individual and individually hears the word of God and interprets as they do here.
Well, I mean, again, I think Greg and most people who are interested in this issue would say that if an adult wants to do this to themselves, that's their business, and they're perfectly right to do so. What we're talking about here is doing this to someone who cannot speak for themselves.
I think an important concern that we should focus on is the vulnerability of young parents who are very, very influenced by the medical model and medical pressure. And it's still too unfortunate that parents are being pushed to make a decision or accept a decision that they really know very little about. They don't know the repercussions and the long-term effects of the mental and emotional and physical scarring that results from circumcision.
Absolutely.
So I mention this because this is not emergency. This is not an emergency surgery.
Right.
It is not emergency treatment of any kind. And just a word to young parents and people who are in touch with young parents is please not rush into this.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome.
Thank you. WBAI, you're on the air. Hello? WBAI.
Hello. I just turned my radio off. I was circumcised at 25 years old. And
Who's this calling?
this is Eric.
Hi.
How you doing?
Fine. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just woke up, so I'm trying to focus on this. I was uncircumcised until I was 25 years old, and it was great. But I had a problem with the smegma and trying to keep it clean and everything. But I had a great sex life, and something happened. I caught some kind of not a disease. I don't know how to say it, an infection that they couldn't cure because I was uncircumcised. So they circumcised me at 25. It was the most painful operation I've ever had in my life. I had eye surgery that was not as painful as that.
Oh.
And now my sex life has deteriorated because of it. And I believe that every circumcised man is missing probably, 60% of the pleasure of the act of love. I can't understand it, why it's done to little babies. I must hurt them so much. What I went through, I couldn't believe it. And I think the children are violated with a lot of pain before they even become aware of being a human being. And how do you feel about that?
Greg?
Yeah.
Yes, I'd like to comment on that. There is absolutely no question that the men who have been circumcised have had a profound reduction in their sexual sensation.
Yes,
And,
agreed. Could I
beg your
go to a hard wire here? I can't talk on this.
Okay.
Darn thing, right?
Go ahead.
Yes, there's no question that men who have been circumcised have a very great reduction in their level of sexual sensation. And in fact, I'd like to put it to you that the use of Viagra in the United States, where you've got so many circumcised men, the fact is so many men in middle age have got virtually zero level of sexual sensation, virtually zero.
Mm-hmm.
And almost 1 in 2 men at 50 years of age, for example, has problems with impotency and sexual dysfunction. And I'd like to put it to you that cutting off 20,000 highly erogenous nerve endings reduces your sexual sensation level by upwards of 80%. So, I think we've just done a study here at my university. One of my graduate students went out and surveyed the sexual partners of who had experience with both circumcised and intact men, and the sexual partners, by and large, overwhelmingly, both the female partners and the gay partners overwhelmingly reported, and these results were highly significant statistically, that the circumcised men seem to get very little satisfaction out of sex by comparison with the intact men. Mm-hmm. And even the survey that we conducted among circumcised and intact men came up with the same results which were statistically significant. So there's no question that the circumcised men have had a great reduction in their sexual sensation. They have been ripped off literally at birth. As you say, other people have said, these people at birth, the child hasn't even had a chance to live yet, and they've already been deprived of their sexual functioning. One wonders why there's such, disharmony in marriages. Why is the divorce rate so high? And very often at the root of this is lack of sexual compatibility, and very often the problem here, I would propose, is the fact that the man has been circumcised. We even find that among the female partners, a study reported in the British Journal of Urology, volume 83, January 99, by O'Hara and O'Hara, shows quite clearly, once again, that the female partners are getting less sexual enjoyment in intercourse with their circumcised partners. Mm-hmm. And those are the women who have had sex with both circumcised and intact men and are in a position to make this comparison.
Absolutely. Greg?
So I think now the results are quite clear. There's no longer any doubt whatsoever. that circumcision profoundly reduces the sexual sensation of a man, and for the vast majority of men who have been circumcised, very large proportion of them, you can virtually say their sex lives are finished.
Well, on that note, that's very sad and tragic note. We have to end here because we're out of time here in New York City on WBAI 99.5 FM. Greg Boyle, as always, I want to thank you very much for sharing your insights about this most painful and controversial issue. And I hope to talk with you in the very near future again here on Walden's Pond here on WBAI New York. Thank you again for your insights.
Thank you for having me on your program, Sheldon.
All right, thank you, and take care now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Greg Boyle, professor of psychology from the University from Bond University in Queensland, Australia, where it is almost 5 o'clock in the morning, Friday morning. Shelton Walden here on Walden's Pond, here in New York on Friday afternoon, approaching 3 p.m. here.